I see where you're going, and I see the independent. If you know, when you think about it, we devote a lot of our time to that $350 or so million thing called General City. We spend a marginal amount of time to that $1.1 billion thing called utilities. So I appreciate where you're going. I do want to comment on a couple of things. I agree with you. One of the last things you said is this for a robust public decision and stakeholder, and I know we're going to have that. And I agree 100%. My personal preference would be elected versus appointed. We can argue about which is more politically or less politically. You know, we can probably go have beers and come to a better discussion than that. But I would prefer elected simply because they're accountable to the voters. And if the voters put the wrong people in there, shame on the voters. So I think it's accountability that. The other thing that I would like to comment a little bit on, and that is the discussion item about qualifications. You know, I look at boards both in the private and the public sector, and I don't necessarily see people that are qualified in that particular area. For example, you look at General Motors, it's not a bunch of car guys. You look at Microsoft, it's not a bunch of computer people. You look at Excel, it's not a bunch of utility people. Matter of fact, there's only, on the Excel board, there's only 2 people that have utility background. One's the CEO, which I think it's a horrible idea to put the CEO on the board. Sorry, Jerry, but I just do. And then if you look, matter of fact, one of the experts you used is Ed Easterlin. By the way, for those of you who knew, Ed used to be an employee. He was Bill's predecessor as the chief financial officer here. But at OPPD, look at OPPD. It's a 7-member board. Not one of them has a utility background, and OPPD is cited over and over and over again as outstanding utility. So I would argue that. Matter of fact, if I was a CEO and I made widgets, the last thing I'd want is a board full of widget makers because they'd all be micromanaging me. You know.
And if I could just speak to that one comment, and we covered this in the paper, we specifically believe that whether you go in the appointed process, which is our recommendation, or elected, obviously anybody can run, but even in the appointed process, our research indicates exactly what you said. Time after time, the recommendation is do not limit yourself in board members to somebody with utility background. You want a broad range of experience. Look for leadership, somebody with strategic vision, but that can be in business, that can be in nonprofit, that can be in regulatory compliance area, and so I hope our paper was clear that when we set out the criteria of what we think the types of backgrounds that would be appropriate for a board, we firmly believe it should not be limited to utilities experience, but that a better board has that broad diversity that they can bring. So I just wanted to.
In a sense, I think we just said the same thing. So
yeah.
But you're absolutely right. You know, and then the last part, and I will go back to my elected versus appointed. I think one of the things we have to accept if we go down this road is that, and by the way, nothing in your recommendation would change the city council regulatory authority. That would still come back to city council for regulatory authorities, I assume under the Colorado Constitution and all that. So none of that would change.
Well, and Dave, if you go back to the slide on authorities, if there is a delegation of authority to a board, a separate entity still within the municipal corporation, we looked at authorities across the board in policy area, the regulatory area, and the legislative area. And our recommendation crosses all of those different areas. Our recommendation would be that the independent board have all these different authorities, in which case, obviously then city council would not have those authorities. Now this is a menu of authorities. And we have
that you can pick and choose from.
That you can pick and choose from, but obviously the cautionary note from all